Hello everyone. Today we'll talk about the solution to the problem minimum add to make parentheses valid. The title says it all, and this is a very similar problem to yesterday's problem. You might want to watch that video because we'll be using almost exactly the same code, but of course I'll remind you of the approach I suggested back then. So what I suggested is whenever you have a parentheses problem, especially with a single type of parentheses, is to look at balanced sequences of parentheses as this kind of mountain range. A sequence is balanced if it starts and ends at the same height. So for instance, those are not the same height, so it's not balanced, and if it never dips below this zero line, this ground level. And of course, a step up is when we have an opening parenthesis, a step down when we have a closing one, and we always step one tile to the right. And I also mentioned in yesterday's video that typically when you can, because then we had the opportunity to swap parentheses. Here we have an opportunity to add parentheses, but either way what we want to do in general is to add opening parentheses to the left, maybe at the beginning of the string, closing ones at the end of the string. It's always okay to move an opening parenthesis to the left or a closing parenthesis to the right in any balanced sequence, and maybe doing that might balance an unbalanced sequence. So we want to create a balanced sequence, so we'll have to take care of both the ends being on the same level and never dipping below the ground level. For never dipping below the ground level, the approach is exactly the same as yesterday. So we'll be maintaining the current level, remember the deepest level that we've ever been at, and it's necessary for us to at least raise that level up to 0. And if we raise that level up to 0 by adding parentheses at the beginning of the string, then everything else is also at 0 or above. So this is the payment that we always have to make. And after looking at the parentheses and making that payment of adding opening parentheses to the left, the ends do not meet, so the final value is not equal to 0. We also have to pay to add closing parentheses at the end of the string to make that value equal to 0. Looking at the code, we'll be maintaining the current depth and the biggest dip that we've ever had. And in this case, I'm using negative values to be good, to be a credit for being above the ground level, and positive values is that we're below the ground level. So for every character in our string, the opening parenthesis reduces the value of cur, closing one increases that value. And we'll of course maintain the biggest dip. And now, at the end, how much do we have to pay? How many parentheses do we have to add? We have to add biggest, because we had a dip that went biggest below the level, which means that we have to pay an opening parenthesis at the beginning of the string to cover that dip and all the other dips at the same time. And then, at the end of the string, we had the balance equal to cur. Now we've also added biggest of opening parentheses, so the balance is cur minus biggest. And no matter if that balance is positive or negative, we have to make it equal to 0. So we have to pay the difference between it and 0, but the positive difference, so we have to take the absolute value. So those are the two parts that we have to pay for. This part makes sure we're always above ground. This part makes sure that we end at 0.